Thank you, Chair. I move opposition amendment number 1 on sheet C 2025-200C. So as my sole contribution to this debate tonight, in talking to my amendment, I begin with a few introductory comments on its formulation. When a nation forgets its stories, or worse, tries to eradicate them entirely, it forgets and undermines itself. And that's exactly what we're seeing with these concerted and distorted efforts to erase one of Australia's most iconic and enduring legacies, the Snowy Mountains Brumbies. In formulating my amendment, I acknowledge a huge number of people with whom I've had regular communication and engagement over many years, and that's from both sides. Because when I take a position, when I stand on something and for something, I do so from a position of conviction that's backed up with thoroughly analysed information. I also acknowledge the fierce emotion that this fractious debate can generate, again, on all sides. However, from my perspective, I wish to make a few things clear in relation to my position and my amendment. My prosecution of these arguments, this debate, is based on factual, cultural, social and historic information, reached after considered research and taken with a genuine desire to achieve pragmatic compromise and a balanced outcome. It's not about ideology, not hysteria and catastrophist claims of the end of the environmental world if we simply ensure the preservation of a few heritage horses and acknowledge their contribution and the role they've played in helping shape who we are as a nation today, rather than wanting to eradicate them and that story entirely. And despite some unnecessary and patently false claims by some, my stand against this repeal bill, my introduction of this amendment, has nothing to do with the backing of any routinely named proponents or advocates of the Brumbies. For me, it's about a very clear and rational argument, not dissimilar to the renewables rollout. You cannot destroy utterly and then somehow claim you're protecting. You can't protect the future by eliminating the past. Along with being an avid historian, I consider myself an environmentalist. That is, I very much care about the environment, and you'll find that most regional people also categorise themselves such. In these circumstances, it's about continuing to advocate for how there can be a carefully cultivated place for all elements, and that it shouldn't be dictated by those as far removed physically from these sorts of environments as they can be, in places like Newtown and Manly. To this point, I again reference the words of the Greens doyen, the Honourable Christine Milne. A lot of rural communities are far closer to their environment, to their ecosystem, to the species that live in them, than many others who declare themselves strong activists. I don't think there's anyone who doesn't share a desire to ensure the long-term ecological health of the park. For the Monero particularly, it's part of who we are, along with its place as a proud national achievement. But it can be about balance through management, not extremism at either end of the spectrum. Not every single horse left to roam wherever it wants. Equally, not every horse killed by whatever means, regardless of how inhumane, and based on spurious claims around which evidence continues to remain unclear, if not outright false. With horse numbers now at a manageable level, other measures such as rehoming and targeted on-ground management are even more achievable and responsible. Several members have questioned why Kosciuszko should have special legislation. But as pointed out, Kosciuszko is already designated as exceptional, culturally, ecologically and historically. When it comes to the Brumbies in this, Labor's own commissioned assessment found the Brumbies met 5 of 9 National Heritage Listing criteria, a remarkable and globally unique outcome. And to prove a previous contribution by one member this evening is wrong about the mention of other animals, while it's been asserted by some that hard-hooved feral horses do extraordinary harm to fragile alpine wetlands and native species, the lack of independent peer-reviewed empirical studies demonstrating a causal connection between Brumbies and any impacts on corroboree frogs, the pygmy possum or the alpine spiny crayfish is something that has not been analysed to the degree it needs to be. As it is, National Parks and Wildlife Service's own habitat mapping, referred to by several members, shows that these species occupy different ecological zones from the horses. That's the conclusion of their own scientific panels, and it's been formally stated that the evidence base is insufficient to detail otherwise. That matters because Parliament must legislate on facts, not assumptions repeated often enough to become the politically easier shortcut. And in that broader ecological context, there is the far greater documented damage caused by deer, foxes, dogs, weeds, infrastructure, increasing visitation, and extensive earthworks for projects such as Snowy 2.0. And of course, absolutely...
Resume your seat, Mrs Overall, please.
Chair, and I will continue by saying a few points that I, again, would at least beg the indulgence of some that I could have had the chance to do so, but I'll turn them to my amendment. I'll turn them to my amendment in that regard. So, pointing out some of the additional things that I have, I will now say that my proposed amendment isn't complicated. It ensures that what so many of us have spoken about in principle continues to be reflected where it actually counts in the plan of management that governs Kosciuszko itself. It requires three things, none of them extreme, all grounded in common sense and respect for both land and legacy. Firstly, it's to continue to recognise formally the cultural and heritage significance of the wild horses in the subalpine regions. Not as mythology, not as romanticism, as a matter of acknowledged record. The government's own assessment already confirmed this significance, and the Minister for the Environment herself has said again here tonight and acknowledged that. This aspect of my amendment simply requires that it cannot be conveniently ignored when management decisions are made. Secondly, to my amendment, it places humane management at the forefront by requiring that rehoming be given priority over lethal control. It's a reaffirmation that non-lethal options should be prioritised, meeting community expectations and what ethical management demands. And thirdly, it safeguards the continuation of a managed, sustainable wild horse population in the historic habitation areas, those places where horses have lived for almost 2 centuries, where for generations they've been woven into the very fabric of not just the region's stories, but the nation's. Former grazing runs, the old stock routes, the mining sites used to build the regional towns, even the footprint of the modern ski resorts. These are the landscapes where heritage already resides and where a small, carefully managed population can coexist with environmental protection. This amendment is not an obstacle to conservation. It's a mechanism that ensures conservation and heritage are not placed in false opposition. It embeds the principle that we can protect the park and protect the stories that make Kosciuszko National Park what it is. It prevents the pendulum swinging to an extreme that would see eradication masquerading as management. What this amendment requires is honesty. Honesty in how the park is described, how decisions are made, and how heritage is valued. It provides the guardrails that prevent future governments from quietly rewriting history under the guise of environmental necessity. It gives balance and compromise. And crucially, it ensures that the decisions made today reflect not just the politics of the moment, but the responsibility we hold in trust for the landscapes and the legacies we are meant to preserve. In my amendment, if we can find room in our hearts and in our laws for both the land and the historic elements that shaped it, in this instance, the living icons that are the Snowy Mountains Brumbies, then future generations will thank us for not choosing sides, but for choosing wisdom, for choosing to ensure all of this is preserved for their futures. And I commend my amendment to the House.